Good morning, strategic management students. It's Fred David here. I appreciate you joining us again here in chapter 6. This is going to be part 2 of where we finished up last time here in chapter 6. We're in the 17th edition. Actually, we finished up part 1 of chapter 6 on page 174 in our last segment. We're going to pick up right here. It's good to see you again. Yeah, I want to remind you with this space matrix on page 174 that we finished up with last time. Today, we're going to talk mainly about the BCG and the IE portfolio matrix that starts here on page 174, 175. But just one final comment on the space matrix. Make sure you realize on page 174 that what we're doing here, we're adding the 2 points on the x-axis, adding the 2 points on the y-axis to get a coordinate. And that coordinate, a vector, is going to always start at the origin, as I see on page 174, and go through that coordinate. So the one on page, the example on page 174, it's in the upper right quadrant. You see that coordinate there, x of 0.8, y of 3.6. So I'll look for some kind of space analysis for you to include in your comprehensive strategic planning project you're developing on your company. Because as you know, the space matrix is one of 5 matching tools. Remember, we're going to the space matrix, the SWOT matrix, and the 2 we're going to look at today, the BCG matrix and the IE matrix, as well as the GRAND. All 5 of those are called matching tools because they match internal with external factors. And that's one of the keys to formulating strategies effectively in companies and organizations, to match your strengths and weaknesses against external opportunities and threats in formulating alternative strategies. And that's what these 5 matching tools do. So I hope you're hanging in here with me as we're on page 174. I see there where the Boston Consulting Group starts. And of course, this was initially developed by the Boston Consulting Group. It's a large consulting firm located, guess where? Boston. And I see on page 175 and 176, there are going to be 2 axes. This is a 4-cell matrix, 2 basic axes. You see this on page 175, 176. The top axis is relative market share position, and the left axis is industry growth rate. So we're going to array, this is a portfolio matrix. By portfolio, you understand here, we're talking about the various profit centers of any company or business. If it's a 3-restaurant small business, the 3 profit centers would be the 3 restaurants. And they're in a Form 10K for a larger company. Normally there'll be a by segment page there where the company organization will reveal profits and revenues, particularly revenues across segments. Please understand those segments can be by region. In other words, Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, USA. Those segments or profit centers can be domestic versus global. They could be by, these segments could be by product. Let's say by repair service versus retail sales. So whatever segments or units that the organization generates profits from. For a cosmetic company like Avon or L'Oreal, the segments could be maybe 3 product segments: cosmetics, fragrance, personal care products. So in this BCG matrix, in any portfolio matrix, in both the BCG and the IE that we're going to look at, our portfolio matrices, we're going to try to examine, analyze where the company, where the organization is making their money, where are they most profitable. And we're going to use this analysis to help decide going forward for the next 3 years, what should we recommend this company to do across these regions or across these products? You understand? I mean, the segments could be online versus in store. You could prepare a BCG matrix based on that. Or it could be, like I said, domestic or global. Or for a company like Lockheed or Boeing, it could be defense versus commercial versus sales and revenues generated from NASA. So a portfolio analysis is exceptionally important in doing strategic planning. I love these 2 portfolio matrices we're going to use here. They're matching tools, just like the SWOT, space, and the GRAND. I see on page 170, 176 here, it lets you know, it reveals here 176 and 177 in the 17th edition that there are 4 quadrants in this BCG matrix. And the upper right quadrant would be any segments that have a low relative market share and have a high industry growth rate. And I see that's illustrated on page 177. So those would be companies that we call them question marks because they're like a small fish in a big pond. And there's a question about what really to do with them, to perhaps divest of them or to really sink a lot more resources into them. And I see on page 177 that any segments that, when you do this analysis for your company, any segments that end up in this top right quadrant called question marks, I see there that in general, you should consider pursuing market penetration, market development, product development, and divestiture. You see those strategies listed on page 177 at the top. So remember, we're going to use the BCG in conjunction with our other 4 matching tool matrices. Now I see that the best place to be on a BCG matrix, the ideal location for circles or segments, we call them profit centers, is in the top left. We call them stars. I see stars, a whole paragraph about what is a star on page 176. But basically, they have a high relative market share position, and they're in an outstanding industry. You see, the annual industry growth rate is somewhere between 0 and 20. Excuse me, on this for the stars. So when I say high relative market share position, you understand that axis is your market share divided by the leader. And you might be the leader. If your company is the leader in that segment, it would be right down the far left vertical line in that BCG. You understand that? Because let's say your market share or number of stores, let's say it's 1,800 divided by the leader, 1,800 equals a 1.0. So that top horizontal line, relative market share position, as you see on page 177, goes from 0 to 1.0. So it's a ratio of your market share or number of stores or revenue for a particular segment divided by the leader. Okay, so that's what that is. I see another quadrant a segment could land in for your company would be the lower left. We call them cash cows, because they generally oftentimes generate more cash than they actually need within that segment. But notice what they are. They're very, very good on the horizontal relative market share position. I mean, they could be the leader, but they're in an industry that's not doing well. You see that the cash cows, they're in an industry in the lower left of that BCG matrix on 177. Their industry growth rate is somewhere between -20 and 0. I mean, that's terrible. That's terrible. It's hard to make profits in an industry faltering that badly. We call them cash cows. And what to do with the cash cow? I see the strategies listed there on page 177. Product development, diversification, retrenchment, or divestiture. So not a really good place to be. But I tell you, the worst place to be on a BCG matrix would be the dogs. And I see on page 177, the dogs are in the lower right quadrant there. They have a low relative market share position. That's their revenues divided by the leader. The leader is crushing them. They're a small fish, and they're in an industry that's not really looking very good going forward in terms of annual growth in revenues. And that's what that vertical axis down the left side is. It's the average annual increase or decrease in revenues for all firms in the industry, folks. Please understand that. That's what the industry sales growth rate is representing on the vertical axis there to the left. So the dogs that's not a good place, but we need to know for our company that we're working on, let's say as your project, where among these 4 quadrants do the segments lie? And that'll have major implications for us in going forward in terms of what we ultimately recommend. As you know now, the upcoming recommendations page will be probably 2/3 into your project Word file, will indeed be a recommendations page with costs associated for each, as to reveal what you recommend over the next 3 years that this company do in the face of powerful rivals that are trying to put them out of business. So this BCG matrix will be really helpful in deciding what to do in that regard. I see one worked out, an example of BCG worked out for you on page 177 at the bottom in figure 6.8. Notice that example there has five segments. We're gonna call them just division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You see that at the very bottom of page 177, and look where they're located. Now I want you to look real closely at this on page 177 at the bottom, because the size of those circles reveal the revenues that segment is providing to the overall company. So I can see there that segment number 1, that is division number 1, is generating the most revenues because the size of the circle is revealing that. And the pie slice is revealing the percentage of profits that segment is providing to our overall company. So you can see there in the bottom of page 177, in one glance, we can see all 5 segments of our company, the extent to which each segment is generating revenue, and the extent to which each of those segments is generating profits. So that's what I see there. Segment 1 is generating 40% of the profits. Segment 2 generating 20% of the profits. Segment 3 generating 8% of the profits. Segment 5 generating no profits. Segment 4 generating 32% of the profits. Look at that. Segment 4, as small as it is there in terms of revenues, generates 32% of the profits. So just at a quick glance there, where would you think this company perhaps ought to devote special emphasis on and growth towards going forward? Probably perhaps segment or division number 4 there. That small division generating 32% of the profits. So this analysis is helpful for us to decide upon a recommendations page here shortly. That's what's important about a BCG matrix. This concept is so important. I see on page 178, another BCG worked out for you. See again, the little table that goes along with that in figure 6.9 on page 178. This segment here, I'm showing you here, one of these segments even has a negative profit. It's losing money. See on page 178, I put it in red there, the authors and I, the co-authors and I did. Segment number 5, minus 18.3%. But on this one, the largest revenue generating segment is, and like I said, these segments could be Europe versus Asia versus Australia versus South America versus North America, something like that. We need to know where we're making the money. And on this one on page 178, it looks like segment number 1 is the largest circle. That means it's generating the largest amount of revenues, and it's generating the largest profit. Segment 1 is, and it's located in the stars quadrant. You see that? It's generating 78% of the profits of this whole company. So it's helpful, therefore, in a BCG matrix to know which segments are question marks, which are stars, which are cash cows, which are dogs. And that'll be helpful for us in proposing a particular specific recommendation, set of recommendations here in the very near future. So are you okay with BCG matrix? You think you could be able to develop one? The template will do this for you. As you know, the template's not going to go out there and collect the data and the research for you. It's going to ask you to just insert it in certain cells there, and then it'll generate this matrix and these circles for you. The template will, that I'm sure you downloaded now from the author website, and you're good to go on that. But if you have any issues with anything we ever talk about now, folks, post a question if you don't mind. I'd really appreciate it on our discussion board, on the FMU Blackboard discussion board page there, because probably maybe another student has the same question. And I'm going to award points this semester, as you know now, for those who will post some questions and answer some questions from others on the discussion board, and certainly respond to any posts I put there to help us along. So I appreciate that aspect of this course going forward. Now let's look, if you don't mind, let's shift gears just a second on page 178 to the IE matrix, called the internal external matrix. It's also a portfolio matrix. In my opinion, folks, it's actually better than the BCG matrix. Notice on page 179, the IE matrix is a 9-cell portfolio matrix as opposed to the 4-cell BCG matrix. And remember, the word portfolio means we're going to showcase in this matrix the segments, the profit centers by region or product or whatever that characterize our company. Because we need to effectively, going forward, we need to effectively allocate resources across segments. So we need to know where we're making the most revenue, where we're generating the most profit, and which of those segments should we really strengthen going forward, and which ones perhaps should we divest. That's what we're trying to determine from both the BCG and the IE. But notice the axes of the IE matrix on page 179, the IFE total weighted score and the EFE total weighted score. I really like those axes better than the two on our BCG matrix, where we were looking at relative market share position and industry growth rate. I mean, you've already developed an IFE matrix and an EFE matrix for your company, for the overall company that you have. You understand? Remember, it ranged from a 1.0 to a 4.0, both your IFE and your EFE scores. Well, what we're saying here on page 179 is companies, organizations, in particular, would develop an IFE and an EFE. Each segment would do their own IFE and EFE. You understand? Because the nature of the factors and so forth could be dramatically different across cosmetics versus fragrances versus personal care, or across defense versus commercial versus NASA. Or in the case of a university, the IFE and the EFE would be totally different for the School of Business versus the School of Nursing versus the School of Education. So yes, indeed, nonprofits, businesses, organizations use this very effectively as well, not just for-profit companies. So I really like the IFE and EFE. Now in this course, folks, I'm not expecting you to develop an IFE matrix and an EFE matrix for each segment of your project company. I want you to just estimate for the different segments based on your reading of the Form 10K, your rival Form 10K, your S&P Net Advantage industry surveys, and other sources that you found there, magazines, trade publications, and various websites like financeyahoo.com. What, in your best judgment, would be the IFE and the EFE score for the various segments of your company? Hopefully in the Form 10K, your Form 10K, it provided some data and information across segments so that you would have some basis for do this. Because we're not into wild guesses on these things. It's going to be your best judgment. That's what we're doing here, folks. And strategic planning, there's a lot of intuition and judgment comes into play, but that's the way the whole business world operates. Please understand that. So that's what we're doing here. No wild guesses, but based on your understanding, your research, in your Form 10K and so forth, for the top of page 179 in figure 610, which I'm needing you to use the template to develop something like that for your company. What do you think would be the IFE and the EFE score for each of your segments of your company? And feel free to do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these things, because I could see a company doing this by online versus in-store, domestic versus global, by state, by region, by product, or whatever. So companies indeed could do half a dozen of these to try to gain understanding more efficiently, effectively of where they're making money and how, across what segments. So I really like the IE matrix. I see one of these worked out for you actually on page 180, an example IE matrix worked out. Notice there are four divisions in this one on page 180 in figure 611. We're in the 17th edition. And notice the little table there. I love the little table. Make sure in your project file you provide a table there, so your audience, myself in particular, being the primary grader on this, is going to know where these circles and pie slices came from. Now, I don't think the template's going to generate the pie slices, but you can comment there. Give me a note. You know, this is a Word file you're developing. You can give me a note to comments on the profits across segments. But the template will indeed generate the 9-cell matrix here and the circles and the size of the circles appropriately. Remember, the size of the circle reveals the percent revenues that segment is generating. Like on page 180, segment number 1 it's a pretty small segment or profit center, or division, but it's generating 50% of the profits. You see that on page 180? And that large segment or division or profit center, those terms used interchangeably, please, when we're doing portfolio analysis. That second segment is generating, it's the largest in terms of revenues, since it's the largest circle there, but it only generates 25% of the net income for the company. That type of information is vital for us to develop an effective, formulate an effective strategic plan and a set of recommendations, which is coming up really soon. So I really like the IE matrix example on page 180. I have another one on page 181 an example IE matrix in figure 612 on the top of page 181. Notice this company is comprised of 5 different segments or divisions. Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it gives the revenue column, the percent revenue, you see in this table, the profits, the percent profits, and then the estimated EFE score and IFE score. You see that on page 181 in table 612. So that's what I'm wanting you to do for your project company, something like that. You'll see it in the Sanderson Farms example project company on the author website. I'm hoping you're doing that, that using Sanderson Farms. It's kind of a guide. A lady last semester, she told me I could use her name. It's Rebecca Cantley at Francis Marion University. She told me to use hers if I wanted to as a sample for others to follow. So I'm doing that. Sanderson Farms. Thank you very much, Rebecca. I greatly appreciate it. It's downloaded there on the, you can download it right there from the author website. But she has an IE matrix in hers, Sanderson Farms, a huge company, poultry in the poultry business, kind of like Pilgrim's Farms and Tyson Foods. But so page 181, yeah, that IE matrix there, if that is what yours ended up looking, something like that, that would be very helpful for you in developing a set of recommendations. And that's going to be the most important page in your project file, but it's going to be developed based on information like I'm seeing in this IE matrix on page 181. So maybe we'll take a short break here in chapter 6. I'd like to pick up here in a few minutes with segment 3 or part 3 of our talk in chapter 6 here. We'll pick up on page 181. We'll pick up on page 180 and 181 here with the grand matrix, and we'll talk some about the QSPM matrix. But this is perhaps the most important chapter in the book, coupled with chapter 8. So I appreciate you reading it and going back through and listening to these videos and trying to incorporate these matrices, because here in chapter 6, we have 6 new matrices, you understand, that need to be included in your project file. The input matrix, but then the matching ones, the matching, remember, space, BCG, IE, Graham, and the SWOT, and the QSPM, which we'll look at on our next segment. Folks, it's good to see you this morning. I'm going to take a short break here. Fred, David, thanks for joining in. Have a good one, and join me back in a few minutes, a little bit, and let's pick up on page 180, 181, and move on forward with our strategic planning analysis. Thank you. Take care.